All right, so welcome back officially to our second day of the retreat, which is entitled Three Dan Tiens and Seven Chakras. The three and the seven combined to create 21. Arithmetic, my friends, arithmetic. So, or 10, you could do 10 too, but I like 21 myself. It's a good, it's drinking age. Used to be voting age until they dropped that a little bit. Because as I heard it, people were really mad that you could get drafted to serve in the military, but you didn't get to vote. Seems pretty reasonable, right? So with that intro to our class, just riffing a little, I'm getting myself undistracted here. Yesterday, we spent the whole first part of the day reviewing the three Dan Tiens, or for simplicity, you could say the three centers. If you were in a, let's say, a yoga environment or something like that, because as we develop this lineage, one of the directions I'm going is more in the way of teaching Qigong in the way you might teach it at a yoga center. I've been spending many years teaching Qigong in the way you might teach like overachieving renunciates. But now, lately, I've been like, oh yeah, how might you do this at a, just general admission yoga class? And so in that, you might say the three centers, rather than having to teach people who just learn to speak a bunch of Sanskrit, and now you're going to make them learn to speak Chinese too, and say Dan Tian. Come on, don't do that. So yesterday, we learned about the three centers. We learned the etymology of what that means, what Dan Tian means. We learned a bit about how they are used in Taoist practice, and then some cross-cultural or pan-cultural perspectives on how these three centers sort of show up in various practice lineages. And that's just to give us, as I'm representing this Taoist lineage, which is often based in martial arts or physical yoga or medical massage therapy or something. And so it has this view of start with your roots. But there are other people for whom it might be better to start with the heart chakra, or for whom it might be better to start up in these head chakras. So the story I'll tell you as we get into now our 7 chakra system, I learned a system of transformational breath work, which we won't have time to go over in this class. Originally, when I developed the level 2 curriculum, I had flirted with the idea that I would try to teach you how to do a facilitated breathwork session in that style too, but that'll have to wait for level 4.5 or something like that. But in this, basically, what you do is you do a circular breathing pattern. In case you ever come across breathwork, this is what a lot of the ones do that are, they try to stimulate sort of subconscious or emotional material. And they do it by breathing through the mouth, which you should know as Qigong yogi people is induces stress in a human system. We're obligate nasal breathers, right? We're meant to breathe through our nose when we are not stressed. We're only supposed to breathe through our mouth when we are emotionally stressed or physically taxed to the point that we just need to gulp in that much air. So they do that to activate your nervous system, to activate your sympathetic nervous system, right? Because stress isn't necessarily bad. It's just stress. There's eustress. We learned that Sanskrit word yesterday. Means good. Eustress means good. Distress, also from the Sanskrit, dus, which means bad. So they would breathe through the mouth, and then they would do a circular breathing pattern. In that case, meaning that there's no pause between the inhale and the exhale. So they would go, if you do about 5 of those like I just did, it'll really start to alter your consciousness. Whee! And in that, the way that flow is done is that we would go through and direct that breathing first toward the root center for a while. And they play evocative music at the same time. So while you're in the root center, it's usually like drums or something, or didgeridoo, what you born here, didgeridoo, and you're, and then there's somebody there sitting with you, which is the final element to make it a total conscious altering situation, right? Is that it's also somewhat interpersonal. So because the breath doesn't stop, we don't get to do our habitual, when a feeling comes up, we'll tend to stop the breath on an inhale or an exhale. And so because the method is to not do that, then you're activating all of these feelings. The music is activating all these feelings, the presence of the other person, and secretly they're doing energy work, although not all breath work facilitators know this or will tell you that. And then you're directing your awareness toward these energetic centers. It's a pretty cool thing. I now have some new insights on how to make it not as harmful as that turned out to be for me, but because it was equal parts beneficial and harmful, right? Being able to activate all this stuff, like it's a lot of prana flowing through your bod, but then that itself is not necessarily a good thing. We can talk about that at another time. But the story is about my worst breathwork session. So I had signed up with my teacher to do some breathwork facilities because I was going through some stuff, man. And one of the things I've discovered about myself is that in spirituality, as well as in therapy and various other things, I'm not one who really appreciates a belief system. I am one who really appreciates tangible results that come about after not too long, right? So if somebody's like, well, yeah, if you just serve the Lama for 21 years, you'll see all these results. Like, yeah, but how do I know? Right? I need something that it's like, if you serve the Lama for 6 months while also being skeptical, you'll see all these results. I could do that. I can white knuckle it for 6 months if I can see those results. And so breath work is really profound because, like just now in 5 breaths, I was like, whoa, this alters your consciousness. Trip out, dude. So anyway, we're doing the session and it's a really cool system. I actually do think I want to teach folks someday, because you're breathing, and then if you can't activate that system, they'll go and like they'll push on your feet and you have to like push them away and stuff like that. And it can be really activating. Normally, I think you should have trauma therapy training to be allowed to do that with a person, or like have their therapist on speed dial. But anyway, it's to activate the stuff, or they'll have you stomp your feet on the floor, or like pound your sacrum on the floor, or stuff like that. Really cool. But in this session, I'm breathing down into the lower centers, and it's just emotional agony the entire time. Like, I don't know why, but I'm just like anxious and uncomfortable. And it's like restless leg syndrome, but throughout my soul or something. And I just want a GTFO, right? Just get the Frodo out of there and go on an adventure. And so I'm going through this is like 20 minutes or something of just like soul agony. And then my facilitator is like, okay, well, why don't you breathe up into your heart center and into your head center? We were like, okay, just come on up here. And immediately the soul agony left. I also alternated back and forth between dissociatively leaving my body and finally just reveling in being calm for a minute. And then she was like, okay, great. She was doing, what I now know as pendulating, right? And she's like, okay, great. Now come on back down to this root center. And immediate restless leg syndrome, but throughout not just my legs, throughout my whole being. And it was a profound learning experience for me that these different centers, just by putting my mind in these different places in my body while activating the prana through breath, or activating my nervous system, or however you want to think of that, they had radically different effects. So I tell you the story at the beginning of our class, both because I think there's 8,000 interesting elements in there that you can go and unpack later about what is breath work and what's the difference between holotropic and rebirthing. Don't do the rebirthing. That stuff's crazy. But do the holotropic. It was developed by a therapist, Stan Grof, who is quite an amazing thinker, author. And it's actually a very balanced system of breath work, in my opinion. But to let us know the frame that I want to offer you on how we're going to go through these 7 chakras. I'm going to give you some Sanskrit names so that you know it, so that we're honoring the tradition, right? And so that you can sort of mine that for wisdom in the ages to come. But really, it's about your direct experience. And what I'd like to tell you is my direct experience, both from myself as well as from working with clients energetically or through body work, that it's not so much that you need to believe that this chakra has 16 petals and this one has 8 and this one has so many, like, because how would you verify that, right? Like how exactly does one verify that? But today we'll learn practices by which we can directly experience the different qualities in these centers. And that becomes a method by which we can assess, like if we're thinking like, oh, okay, the universal question, what the hell's wrong with my life right now? I don't know if you're old enough to know that that question recurs every once in a while. One way that we can assess that is we can actually go through and look at like, okay, well, what's the balance of these centers? Or how able am I to embody these centers? So that breathwork session, worst breathwork session of my life, that's the story about it. It actually never resolved in that session, which is a real bummer, because one of the things, if I ever teach you breathwork, one of the things from a system I learned called Vivation is that, and very similar to our empathy dojo training, you always want to go toward a resolution. You want this feeling of, clarity appeared, or the dust settled, or something like that. And obviously, some percentage of the time, the therapists and the vocal coaches and the massage therapists will know sometimes you don't get there. You have to manufacture that. But this breathwork session, it was like every time I went back down, I was in soul agony. And so what I think happened, I don't quite remember this, whether I think that my therapist just let me dissociate and fall asleep. And then when I woke back up, that was when we finished the session, because why leave me in agony, right? Just let the dude dissociate. But looking back years later, the big crux of a lot of what I was going through at that time was about the issues of those lower centers, of how to reconcile myself to living on planet Earth, in a body, with relationships, having an ego that is going to be continually assaulted and dissolved by life, because that's just what life do, right? And knowing that, and this is continuing work, knowing sort of the architecture of that psycho-emotional landscape of the body allows me to go and then apply the tools that, rather than just dissociating sort of globally in my life in the way that felt good, like, okay, that makes the pain go away, or having to live in agony, I could actually do the work of, metaphorically speaking, getting those centers to open so that it's not just agony to reside in the lower base chakra, in the sacral chakra, in the navel chakra. And it's not just dissociative bliss to reside in the heart or in the third eye. So that's kind of what I want to come from, is a practical exploration of the power centers of the body. And if you go on to call them by their Sanskrit names, then great. If you go on to never do that and make up your own system that says like, no, there's 3 brains. Science says there's a heart brain and a gut brain, and then you make up your own stuff and steal all of these techniques, and never finish your Qigong 2, but you help people, like, who cares, right? Like, do that. Put it in, just, oh yeah, that's my acupuncture practice. I had a vision of a guy with a cool mohawk, and it informed me. And then you go and help people, and that'll be great. So, but that's where we're going. Whether you Sanskritize it or you Westernize it or whatever, it's coming from this source of direct experience, which is what the tantric tradition is about. So the other sources, and then we're going to do some practice. The other sources I would like you to be aware of, a couple of books. One is called Body Mind, and I'll write the author's name because I don't know how to pronounce it. Body Mind by Ken, I think it's Deichtwald or Deichtwald or something like that. But there it is, D-Y-C-H-T Wald. And this is the one that I would generally give to the students in massage class when we would do body-mind interactions stuff. And the book is a bit dated. I hope there's nothing that is like subtly misogynistic or homophobic as dated. I doubt there is, but you never know. Nice white guys from Esalen from the late 70s and through the 90s, like, crap, it's probably going to show up. So I hope not, now that I've recommended it. It's been a while since I read it. But what he goes through is very applicable to our work, because he basically goes through each part of the body and talks about, from his experience in working like in the Rolfing community, with what emotions tend to come out when you release trigger points in that part of the body. And so it's a very practical, on the ground, more anecdotal than lab research, but still a very kind of empirical view of what the psycho-emotional centers in the body do. The other one, if you want, is you could read the book Rolfing by Ida Rolf. And in that, she also, I don't remember how much, because there's a lot of just fun anatomy stuff in there too. I got mine used for like $6, so you could probably find that. But she also mentions a bit about the chakra centers and the emotions that she saw would tend to come out of people's body as she was developing, as a pioneer, this style of deep tissue therapy back at the big consciousness hub of Esalen Institute, where rebirthing and holotropic breath work and all of this stuff were being developed in this weird melting pot of the 1960s and 70s. So that's fun. So that's kind of where we're going to go. We're going to go from, this is a big melting pot of a class, which is my experience as a body worker, plus Chinese medical Qigong therapy, plus Himalayan yoga tradition, and sprinkles of the New Age movement, from which I originally learned the 7 chakra system. Let's be honest, right? There's going to be some sprinkles. It's not all bad, the New Age movement. Okay, there's some good heart in there. So does that sound at all fun for how to spend a day? All right, well, at least Miko likes it. Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Just delayed reaction there. So let's do a little practice. We're going to start today with an old pal, the Master sequence. So sitting or standing or take a nap instead of practicing along with us, all of those are fine, but I am going to help you start off with the Master sequence. And here we go. Let's start with shaking heaven to earth. So shaking hands and wake up that inner smile. And then elbows, shoulders, forward, backward, forward again, backward again. Let's get the belly rumbling, the rumbling and the tumbling. Oh yeah. All right, and one leg, hip, knee and ankle. So we're using the mind to direct the movement and the chi. And then the other side. Inner smile, inner smile, inner smile. Let's twist through. And over the shoulder. Toes up. And come to center. Three-way stretch. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale back. Exhale in. 2. Back. In. One more time. Back. In. Okay, pulling down the heavens. Inhale. Ha sound. Ha. 2. Ha. And 3. Oh. You drop into the Wuji posture. And just for a moment, being aware of the body. And this is non-judgmental, mindful awareness. So notice, hey, oh, is your body blissful? Is it tired? Is it grumpy? Is it ouchy? Whatever. Bringing mindfulness to it. Or another way to say that, really, in my opinion, is we're bringing compassion to it. We're bringing loving awareness to the body. You can always add compassion. And notice also your breath. And notice your mind. Okay, so we're about to start the master sequence. And the thing to let you know, I may have told you before, but as this sequence sort of came to me, I realized it was a great way to combine the 5 major organs of traditional Chinese medicine and the 6 chakra system in the style of Tibetan yoga. So what's the difference? Well, generally it's where you put your intention. And we'll talk a little bit about this as we go through the day. But just to let you know, so you have the right orientation as we do the practice. This first one opens up the whole body and energy field. And the same thing with this second set. So these first couple sets, all those tiger ones, are for opening up the whole energy body. Then we're working on the root and belly center. So we've got our kidney thing, and then here you go. Oh, look at that, working on the root and the belly center, working on the root and the belly center. Then it goes on to the navel and solar plexus center when we get to our dragon stuff. Oh, there it is. There's that big twist in the tummy. And the idea is that it's opening up these kinks in your energetic body. Then the set goes on to your heart center. And then in these last ones, it also helps to open up the throat. And then it works the whole body as well as all the way up to the crown. So just a little glimpse as a lot of you are becoming more advanced students at sort of what's behind the curtain in how these practices work. So without that, don't think too much about it, but let's go through the master sequence. So starting with propping the heavens, we inhale up. Exhale with the he sound. You could also think about that central channel opening on up all the way into that crown. Being like a light fountain. One more time. Stretching the whole body. Gonna step out to the horse stance, fierce tiger. So this is just filling the body with power. Inhale, especially into your lungs. Exhale, hold the posture. But you really want this feeling like your whole body like inflates. And then exhale, round forward. Fierce tiger seizes prey. Inhale into the back of your lungs. Exhale. And one more. And then release it down. Drawing the bow, you're going to circle up, turn into that warrior stance. And again, just feel like your whole body fills with power. Use the lung sounds. Inhale, creating this sense of openness. One more set. And last time. Step in a bit. Clouds descend on the mountain. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale, filling those lungs with white qi. Exhale, it descends down to nourish the kidneys and the lower Dan Tiens. One more time. Good, then grab onto those kidneys. Inhale and inflate your back. Exhale and release. Inhale, you can visualize a blue light filling those kidneys. Exhale, see them glowing with that blue color. And one more time. And exhale, we're going to fold forward. You can take the knees or take all the way to the stretch. And now I want you to feel that whole waist region opening up as you inhale and twist and exhale. So feel like, as we talked about those knots proposed in the yoga systems of Tibet yesterday, like your twist is just loosening up any of those little knots in this whole lower tummy region and even the root. One more set. And then especially for the root, we're going to inhale from the earth. Feel like the earth's energy comes up and we send it into those kidneys. Again, come down, inhale it up. And exhale. One more set. Here we go. Inhale. And exhale. Release the hands, step out a little bit. Dragon shows its claws, breathing in. Twist and stretch. And once more. Dragon soars in the sky. Expand, expand, expand. And then let's go over into the side bend. And then if that's simple for you, if you want, you can even take that top hand down and come into the twist. And in either of those positions, try to feel as if the whole belly now, especially like the solar plexus and navel region, are being unkinked. Unkinked. Okay, then bring it on up. Big wingspan. And side bend. This also stretching out those channels through the belly. And then take that top hand down if it's comfortable for you, or you could just stay in the side bend or even take a rest. twist it up. Oh yeah. And try to take the stretch in the tummy, in the belly chakra. Okay, bring it on up. And we beat the drum and punch down. 2. One more time. Keep your legs down. Bring your phoenix wings up. And exhale to the heart. So now we're into this heart center. Inhale. And exhale. One more time. Then unkinking the heart. Press your right hand, twist, and at the same time as you twist, arch upward, and exhale with that ha sound. Like you're vibrating tension out from the heart region. Inhale, switch sides, press the left, twist and arch. Again, twist, press, and arch. One more time. Come to the center, ripple up. Bring your feet in fist distance apart. And now either hands on your back or you can clasp them. You're going to lift the heart up toward the ceiling. You're going to exhale with the ha sound. Let the neck open as well. Feel like you're releasing the heart and throat centers. Good, then inhale, stack it back up. Release your hands, gently fold forward. Feel free to bend your knees if you need to. Exhaling with that ha sound. And it's as if any stagnant energy just drains out through your arms, down to make a compost for the Mother Earth. Good, let go, let go, let go. Bend the knees, interlace your hands, ripple on up. Now feel the whole chakra system awakened all the way up to the crown, and you exhale, you're going to twist. Inhale back. Exhale and twist. Inhale back. Really try to feel that uplift from the crown. Then like we did yesterday, feel yourself all the way from underground, unifying earth and heaven. I forget which side we started on because I was talking too much, so let's do one more. Then inhale, center. Exhale through the mouth, all the way down. Separate your feet a little wider than shoulder width, holding the ball. And we visualize that little jewel or little pearl down in the tummy center at that golden cauldron region. And this is adopting that Taoist practice of starting with the lower Dan Tiens as the seat of our sense of a personal self, and that we're crafting or cultivating a healthy, engaged, holistic personal self. Like an I that is part of the we and is part of the all. So imagine that any beneficial or blissful energies released by this practice are awakened in your organs or your centers, flow into this little pearl that spins and spirals in the belly center. You can sort of imagine that that's feeding this deeper self, this soul being, or your original spirit, however you like to think of it, which is at the same time already your deepest self, and also that which it is your life's work to cultivate. And then just feeling as if this pearl begins now to radiate out these rainbow lights into the body, taking this harmonized and balanced energy you've created there And it shines it into any part of you that needs harmony, that needs healing, rest, or comfort. Then gently bringing your hands in, just gathering up the surplus chi from your palms. And release them now. Let's pull down the heavens with a sigh. Drop into Wuchi. Notice how you feel. Check in with your physical body. Does it feel different? Again, it's non-judgmental awareness, but we do have a life positive impulse. So when you notice, oh, wow, my knee feels better, well, then great. You're welcome to celebrate that as we cultivate this compassionate, mindful awareness. And going into our 3 Dan Tiens Qigong, we're going to start with La Qi. So hands come out, and as you exhale, they play the accordion toward the center. And as you inhale, they gradually separate. And we're focusing on the sensations in the hand. You don't really have to do anything energetically. In fact, you'll feel more if you less do. I'm starting to talk like Yoda. I think the Qigong's working. You'll feel more if you less do. La Qi, pulling Qi, focusing on the sensation of the hands to help us shift into a subtle orientation. One more time. And exhaling. And we do our opening moves of supporting the sky, palms up, inhale. Get to the collarbone level, flip it over, exhale, pressing up. And then opening the palms, and now feeling the expanse of the sky. And as you exhale, this pours in to nourish the upper Dan Tiens. So it's actually all those meanings of heaven. It could be the spiritual realm, benevolent ancestors, the stars, the sun, the moon, and we're tuning into that causal plane of all potentiality. Let's do 2 more times. I think that'll be 5. And it's very gentle. We're not like going out and grabbing the energy. No, we open these centers and then we allow them to be nourished. Let's do 1 more here. My counting brain is not on. I'm just kind of going by feel. So hope you don't mind. Okay, open up. Then the great bird flaps wings. We sink down. And now you want to reach out into nature. So I like to think of like how trees are so generous with their oxygen and their fruit and stuff, which actually we're serving them. But that's the same way when we're altruistic. It's actually serving us when we give. So you're gathering in this like generous, abundant, free flow energy. And you could even think that from sacred stones or sacred sites, and even beautiful people who are in prayer or who are beaming out compassion from their heart, this is an energy that can gather and awaken that middle Dan Tiens. Let's do 1 more full set. Inhale and exhale. And then inhale up. And either do the basic version or the airplane version as you fold forward and feel the earth now bellowsing up into your tummy center. So inhale, expand, and feel the solidity of the earth. You gather that and it brings that solidity into your own body. Inhale, exhale. Inhale and exhale. Let's do 2 more. And 1 more. Then bend your knees, sit the butt under, and gather that energy up from the earth. holding the ball at the lower Dan Tian. Staying in this standing meditation, visualizing now your 3 centers. And it's as if these are points of connection with those 3 great powers. So they've been primed by the Qigong. You can feel that the head center is sort of somehow connected to that spiritual plane or energy of the stars, or however you like to think about it. Feel that that heart is connected to that plane of generosity and altruism and benevolence. Feel that your belly is connected to that solidity and support and stability of the earth. Then imagine all these 3 centers in harmony with one another, communicating with one another, and in balance with one another. And then finally, for the sake of meditation, while your head will still, of course, commune with heaven, and your heart will still, of course, commune with that realm of compassion and benevolence, we bring the energy to settle in our Dan Tian. So we imagine that that ball of light in the head center floats down and merges with the ball in the heart, and floats down and merges with the ball in the lower belly. And you can imagine that ball of light in the lower belly shrinks down and merges with that sense of the pearl that we created before. So that all this work we've done, it's like it integrates into that holistic persona, center of gravity that is representing our deepest essence. And once again, bringing those hands in, gathering up any sort of surplus chi and warmth in the hands. We'll do gathering earth and heaven. So we inhale from the earth, and inhale palms up, heaven. We smooth down the central channel, the Tai Chi pole. Seal the chi. Tell it to stay, nourishing that center of gravity. Inhale. And exhale. One more time, earth and sky. Smooth it down. And seal. Good, let's rub the palms. And wash the face a little bit. Comb back your hair. 10 dragons rushing through the forest. You'll remember this if you watched the Qigong for spring season video. There's your advertisement. Okay, then get your monkey paw, jab it into your trapezius muscle and pull down on that arm. Oh yeah, give yourself a little acupressure all along that trapezius. You could do the point in the middle, gallbladder 20 something, or you could just work all along through there, and it's really nice. Good for you. Oh yeah, other side. There you go. Oh. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. That's nice. Okay, let's do a soothing therapeutic hug. Take your right hand, stick it in your armpit, and that's like holding your heart. Then you take your left hand and you hug over the top, and then just give a little huggy buggy. Oh yeah, good old me. I love ya, little rascal. It's nice. Okay, rub your kidneys and your whole lower back, your sacrum, etc., etc. Let's bang on the hips. And bang on the front of the hips. Let's stomp it out. I don't wanna. Let's drop the post. Inhale. Drop. 2. And 3. Trembling horse. 1. Yeah. 2. And 3. 1. Pulling down heavens 3 times. Sigh it down. Just with that sense of just clearing the decks like a sigh can do. And one more time. Rest in Wuchi. Notice your body, your breath, and your mind. Okay, deep breath in. Exhale. Let that meditation go. And we will come on back. All right. Joys and squirrels. I mean, ladies and gentle thems. Let us do a little work. Let's do a little work. Okay, so we got our basic warm-up and we got a review. Let's hear how your experience was, or if you have any questions, if you want to review anything from that session that we just did.
I definitely needed that. That was beautiful. And
Good.
question around the one hand in the armpit and the other hand. Do we want to do that on both sides?
Not to my knowledge. I think I stole this from like Peter Levine's somatic experiencing or some system like that. And it's so this is like to hold the heart. And this is like to hug over. So you don't necessarily need to do that. It's not like a yoga posture or like polarity therapy in that way. It's more like, yeah, get your heart through that little armpit. So you could, I guess, but I don't personally feel the need to. So yeah.
And does it matter whether it's left or right?
The right is to like hold the heart side as I
Okay.
was taught it. So that's the reasoning behind that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll see if I can figure out where I got that one from and see if they have any more details, but that's how I remember it. Yeah. All right. Other questions on the work? How did that feel to do the master sequence with that sense of the 6 chakra system? Is that confusing, fun, enjoyable? What do you say, Miko?
I really enjoyed it, and especially I really felt the connection with the throat and the heart, because I have a bunch of tension up here, and like when we were doing the heart stretch up towards the heaven, I felt the opening happening here. Yeah, it was really powerful.
Awesome. Yeah. So you don't necessarily need to bring a big chakra focus when you do that one. But to know it's there actually gives it a slightly different vibe. So that's pretty fun. It's not necessarily like if you were doing Tibetan yoga and you're like, oh shit, I got kinks in my chakras. What Qigong should I do? That's not necessarily the best. It has been for me sometimes, actually. That's been the one that works the best. But there are others where you like we said, there's this one where you roll your neck and like, well, then you think about your neck chakra while you're doing that, right? So in this one, you only get a tiny little bit of neck, but when you know that it's in there, and so as you're doing these, they're going to unkink your heart and your throat center, because you have that in sort of the back of your mind. It works on this whole other level of your being, and so I wanted to play with that. I don't think you should try to teach it that way to your students. It's a bit, there's enough. It's enough, babies. But so you just have that as we're going through this context, you can kind of use the practices, and feel these different aspects of them. Okay, Jim, what do you say?
It was nice to unkink. I was really in my root this morning, feeling crabby, aggressive. It happens occasionally. but it's been a while. So
Yeah.
it was nice to unkink and feel a little less
Yes. Yes.
you know, I get rooted down in that lower power center, and I just stomp around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, which is
I
great
dropped,
self-knowledge, right?
I dropped
It's
my toast this morning, and it landed face down, and it was like,
of course it did.
yeah. So
Did anybody
it
ever
was
see this little video somebody made on the internet? And you know how cats always land on their feet, and your toast, if you drop it, always lands butter side down. So the video, they strapped a buttered toast to the back of a cat, and then they dropped it, and it was a perpetual motion free energy machine because it just kept spinning. So anyway, I think we solved it. Yeah, that's great. Self-awareness, I think, of how to use this is like when we know, like, oh, I'm lodged in my aggression center, right? I'm lodged. And what is it when we get grumpy? It's like we're lodged in self-grasping, right? We're lodged in poisonous self-grasping. You know, it could be like, oh, you're on the narcissism side of the spectrum. And then if we got lodged in our heart center, you'd be more on the like codependent side of the spectrum, right? And so, but if you could have both of those, then it wouldn't become that you're both narcissistic and codependent. God, that sounds awful. I don't know if that's even possible, you know. And then if you go up here, you're more on the totally dissociative side of the spectrum, right? But if we can harmonize, then we're like, that's great. And so just this, it's just a poetic way of language. It's not necessarily that there are structures, but when we know that these are these ancient styles of work, and what it's meant to do, like in modern times, you could think is like give your therapist a little less to have to do for you, that you have this sort of symbolic language by which your body speaks to you, and you can speak back to your body. And it just goes like, no, dude, you're locked and you're down in your tummy, like get a little heart or something. So it's really cool to kind of hear that the way you're using that. Matthew, what did you have to say? Anything? Did it go away? You still have it?
Totally unrelated. I was just thinking we could probably do the same thing with 2 pieces of bread buttered, strapped back to back.
See, but it wouldn't be as funny. Because there was a cat. Oh boy. Okay, cool. So we got those. Janelle, what do you say?
So my body is kind of in defense mode right now as I feel this virus start to kind of like try to put its claws in. I've got a sore throat. I'm feeling it, pressure. I'm feeling lymph nodes. I'm feeling all this stuff going on right now. And so I was coming into the practice today, not realizing how like defensive I am in there. That's kind of been the running joke for the last couple of days, that like I'm defending Helm's Deep, and we're gonna do our best to fortify the walls as much as possible.
Yeah.
But then when I got in there, I was like, oh wait, that's actually what I'm doing. But through the process of doing that and that reminder of this cohesion, that like maybe I'm creating some negative tension in there with the desire to have this defense, and for this desire to be fighting this stuff. I'm driving it a little too hard and creating tension where I don't need to be, that could be counterproductive. And so I just tried to work on letting it go. And through half of the master sequence, I was coughing through most of the open, deep breathing stuff. And a lot of the, the bow and all that stuff was kind of like catching in my lungs. And I was like, all right, I just need to let that go. Maybe I'm the one controlling that. Maybe that's not this virus. Maybe I'm the one constricting it. And so I just tried to really breathe into that and remember that cohesion. And I stopped coughing. I stopped coughing, and my breath got deeper, and I felt it more permeating and actually was allowed to be more of a healing process than I think it would have been otherwise. So
Wow.
it was a really cool kind of like awareness, evaluation, and putting it into practice all at once in the same practice.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
That's neat. I love hearing that. Yeah, we do have this. There's a recursive process, right? Where if your body is tense for some reason, the very inflammatory or defense mechanism things will tell the mind too that it's stressed out, right? And vice versa, is that if the mind gets stressed out, it doesn't necessarily strengthen the body's natural tendency toward healing. And so if we can find that and we go like, oh, okay, body, you're stressed out. And then we don't add another stress onto that. You know, we just go, okay, there's the one stress. Then all of a sudden, you know, like half of our problems have resolved with, you know, there still is a real life issue maybe, you know, but then the capacity for healing is unbound, you know, by all the other stuff we might put on it. So that's really neat to hear. All right, good. Feel clear on those. So we got we reviewed our 3 Dan Tiens Qigong from yesterday, and that's kind of how it'll feel in a class, right? You know, we did tiny warm up. You know, in your class, your warm-ups would likely be more extensive. We did a clearing Qigong, right? And so in this case, it was clearing those organs with their sounds, as well as kind of clearing any chakra kinks. And then we went into that harmonizing Qigong, which the 3 Dan Tiens Qigong is really a harmonizing Qigong. It's a bit of a Shen Gong too. It kind of throws you into a meditative state. So, and then we did our stuff to snap out of it, be able to snap out of it. So that could be a nice flow if you mastered these enough to begin teaching them in your level 2 intermediate teacher classes. And that's that. So we've accomplished one of my purposes this morning. We got a good review. We did the practical example, and hopefully the feeling that you have after doing a Qigong like that, like it'll be a little different than the Taoist 5, for example. And we spoke about that in like level 1 Qigong classes. You know, the Taoist 5 is more tonifying. This is more kind of harmonizing and even dispersing in some cases. But another paradigm, you're old enough now for it, couldn't tell you before, just too much, you know, but another paradigm is the distinct feeling like after the master sequences, because it's actually doing that unkink the chakras vibe. And like, whether you know it or not, that's how those yogi type movements that are in there work. And so there's a feeling that you'll get afterwards sometimes of like being kind of refreshed, you know, it's not just calmed. It's not just, totally blanked on the word. I was not just calm, not just tonified, but there's this feeling of like, you know, the kinks actually get unbound. And this is what they're talking about. It's our little taste of what they're talking about in the yogic texts when they're saying undoing the knots in your channels that cause the choke point aspect of these chakras. Okay, so it's a good start. Shall we take a little 10-minute break in case you need a coffee or to go potty or something? And then my clock says 11:44. So let's come back at 55 after the hour, and we'll dive into the root center. Bum, ba, da, bum. All right, so I'll see you in 10 minutes. Yes, so the question, there are a couple. So the question one about breath work actually triggering some breathing issues specifically. And then the other is really kind of about the catharsis or the re-triggering of issues that maybe have been dissociated from by doing practices like that. And for the second one, it's the same for all of our practices, that we're not really trying to induce a catharsis. I'm really not trying to induce any kind of catharsis. I don't even want to deal with that. And it's not the appropriate environment. Like, I just want to teach some Qigong and etc. And so one of the tricky things is, like I was mentioning in my story, you know, like I like practices that lend themselves toward direct experience. And sometimes, such as in a lot of the breathwork systems, how they do that is they speed things up and work a little bit forcefully. And in that case, it's kind of similar to like using psychotropic agents as well. According to yogic tradition, that speeds up what is otherwise usually a slow but natural process, right? And so similarly with any of the breathwork styles that they use, kind of like panting breathing, like I don't, you know, ideally you're not panting too much, because that really will throw you into a stress response. But there is still, you are hyperventilating a bit despite your best efforts not to. And this activates a lot. So that's the first thing to say is, for us, we're not going for that. And in general, I have not seen that to be particularly integrative. But at the same time, I have found myself, just personal experience, you know, doing some things like somatic experiencing exercises or something like that, and not getting any juice out of them. And they're like, oh no, it's supposed to be slow. I'm like, you guys, I'm paying you more than $100 an hour. I need like an insight or an epiphany or something at least every 2 sessions, because I could do this myself. Like I know how to wiggle my toes and then almost wiggle my toes. So that said, the first thing on breath work, just to have this, and then we got to go on. But it's good to get these in here, because in like the work in chakras can be, even when we're doing what seems mild, can be catharsis inducing, can be cathartic. So we should review that a little bit. But in the breath work, one thing that we are to do is, actually, I really like Wim Hof's method. Not all of it. I don't necessarily love Wim Hof's personality like some people do. You know, I don't dislike it, but you know, it's not like, oh yeah, if that's what it turns into, then I'm going to do it hardcore. You know, like whatever. He's a guy. He's accomplished some cool stuff, but I like his method because it actually adheres to classic yoga in the sense that you do the activation breathing. He does it. He says he doesn't care whether get in through your nose or through your mouth, just get it in. And he says it's not about hyperventilating, but it will hyperventilate you. That's part of how the process works. But you do like 30 or 40 breaths. This very activating breathing, but then you follow it with breath holds. So you hold on the breath out. And usually the instructors will try to tell you to like force yourself to go for a minute on your first session, which I don't recommend personally, but you go until like you have a bit of discomfort because you need to breathe, right? And then they do a shorter hold on the breath in. And I don't know if he designed it this way on purpose, but what we know is that breath out holds are safer for your heart and your blood pressure than breath in holds. So doing the long one on the breath out is actually like, oh, that's pretty clever. Anyway, how one of my lamas explained it is, when you do both of those, you're actually training your system to adapt to low levels of carbon dioxide and to adapt to high levels of carbon dioxide in the system. And you need both, right? You actually, yogically, you want to be able to expand both of those ranges of tolerance. But when we do practices, even like holotropic breathwork, holotropic is one of the better ones because it's not doing the over breathing the whole time. It does that as an activation phase, at least as I learned it. And then the rest of the time, you're just breathing, or you just keep breathing. So you're not doing hyperventilative breathing the whole time, at least as I was taught it. But still, when you have a breathing pattern that comes up afterwards that's changed, often it can be because even a little bit of hyperventilating is actually really bad for you. Even a little bit of hyperventilating is actually really bad for you. And so the way one could fix it is you practice breath holds. And those are the opposite of hyperventilating. It's actually letting carbon dioxide build up in your bloodstream. And this has a bunch of health effects that we don't know about. And so that's all I have time to say about that for now. It's a cool topic, and you should read, if you want, The Oxygen Advantage by McKeown, I think. I don't know. Patrick somebody. Oxygen Advantage, you'll find it. And so that goes through a lot of the science of that, and like why we get an anxiety attack when we hyperventilate, which you think it's the other way around. You hyperventilate when you get an anxiety attack, and that can happen too, but you also will give yourself anxiety if you are hyperventilating because of the way our system is made. And so those breathwork systems that want to induce catharsis, it's because they're stimulating your sympathetic nervous system. And so if you can get yourself into a trance, like you can have a groovy time because you are activated, but you're doing that with a way of breathing that you shouldn't do too much of. And it can induce catharsis. So for the breathing problems themselves induced by that, it just means you have to put in the breath holds and do the other half, right? You've attuned your body to having way too little carbon dioxide, and the brain freaks out about that. Now you have to go and attune it to having way too much, which actually trains the brain to calm down, counterintuitively enough. And then, of course, with the other stuff, with the emotional and things like that, it's sort of the same as if somebody took their heroic dose of mushrooms because they read that book from the mushroom dude, and he was like, this is so good, and they were like, okay, I'll try it, and now all of their stuff is up, right? For us as a friend, we can guide them through some of that pendulating, resourcing, empathy dojo stuff, and then if it's bigger than that, we send them to someone who is going to be trained to help them deal with the emerging material. So our job as an ally to the mental health field, right? Our work is kind of in the spiritual and holistic field, and there's this kind of Venn diagram, right, where like the spiritual work and the mental health work blend and mix. And one of our things can just be when someone is telling us about their spiritual experience or their yoga experience or Kundalini crisis or whatever, to be able to go, well, here's what you could try to soothe the prana. And then if their problem goes away, then great. And then if their problem doesn't go away, you can say, this may be repressed material emerging. And to a lot of breathwork folks, they didn't know that was an option. So, that's where our job is to go, hey, that sounds like repressed material. Here are 3 types of therapy that could help you process it now that it's up. And I like to say, great, now it's up. Now you know it's there. Because the fear constriction on the part that we work on, the pranic part, fear constriction tightens up those channels and makes it worse. So when they go, oh no, I did this rebirthing and now my life is terrible and my health sucks. And if you go, wow, you're right on track. First they'll go, huh? And you go, well, yeah, now you can deal with it. That was in you and you didn't even know it was there. And often you will feel so much relief that we can actually go and start to work with that material without creating much more constriction. So those are a couple answers to stuff brought on by doing breathwork. Since we brought up breathwork, we should talk about it. And that's why I actually like the template of Wim Hof's type of work. I don't necessarily think you should sign up for that or something, but because it involves both. It involves an activation, and then it involves this breath hold where you're like down regulating the vagus nerve and you're teaching the body to go into this like hibernating state, and you're balancing out the levels of carbon dioxide in your blood. And so like rebirthing and vivation and the ones that don't do that can lead to these imbalances just on a purely physiological style. Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's why if you're getting anxiety from holding the breath in Wim Hof, you're holding your breath for too long, right? Don't listen to the instructors. I like this. I like the template of Wim Hof. I don't really like most of the instructors that I've seen, because they get this. Okay, I've been watching TikTok too much, but they get this like colonialized attitude, right? Where like, you got to hold the breath longer, and it's like this no pain, no gain bullshit. And that's where yoga tradition could really tell a person that here's how it works, just in case, because we're talking chakras. This will help us finish up my Tibetan chakra transmission that you should probably have sometime in your life. They always say, don't hold your breath too long. And the reason is, generally with breath holds, what they do is they try to pull the prana from those side channels and they visualize it going into the central channel. And then you pause the breath, because it's thought that the breath is like a karmic habitual habit. And so you pause your karma and you focus on it all going into essence. You're focusing on essence, right? And when you stop the breath, it creates a minor emergency in your system. And so the mind gets really sharp, right? And so if you can go like, I'm a radiant light that came from the heavens, but is manifest on earth. And you can hold that. Then the mind goes, oh, I guess we are. She's serious right now. Oh, man. But, okay, and so that's 30 seconds, 31, 32. And then when the body goes like, oh, I need to breathe. And you go, shut up, take it. Now, what are you focusing on? You're focusing on being mean to yourself. You're focusing on tension. And those are going to kink off those side channels. And then on the other side, when you let your breath go, you're supposed to be able to the sign is you let the breath go like this. Right? And then you stay in that essence state. But you've held your breath too long because you let the breath go like this. According to traditional yoga, as I was taught, you just did it wrong. You did anti-yoga just now. And so you want to find, and McKeown's book, I think that's the Patrick I'm thinking of, The Oxygen Advantage, is really good at this, because he talks about finding the spot between mild air hunger without tension, right? And it's like a good workout, you could say. It's like you want to feel like, and I'm becoming a master of this because my body can do more than it should. I get weekend warrior syndrome because I used to be a Kung Fu athlete. Right now I'm not, but my body can still do that stuff. It just shouldn't do all of it. But like in your workouts, you want to find, oh, how long of a run gets me to this place where I'm like, oh, I'm pushing myself. But when you go home, you can recover. And it's the same thing with the breath, is you're like, oh, now I'm in the realm, which is holding the breath longer than I could before. I can feel that, but I can still exhale relaxed. So yeah, so that's where, like I said, traditional yoga would be, you would do Bhastrika Pranayam, one of these kind of breath of fire things, and then you would go into a Kumbhaka and you would hold. And what the Bhastrika does is it blows off all of your carbon dioxide so that you can hold your breath longer. And you can stay in that stillness longer, but then the stillness makes carbon dioxide build back up in your bloodstream so that it becomes healthier for you than if you just were training and hyperventilating all the time. And that's one of the ways, the physiological ways, why you get Kundalini crisis when you do that type of Kundalini stuff without the breath holds. Okay, thanks. I've been researching this for years. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk about it. So, let's get into our chakras. Yes. Okay, couple things I want you to know about your chakras, because you can get a lot of this info in the world, right? But I want to tell you what you can only get from me, or probably. So the first thing I think you ought to know is that you want these psycho-emotional centers in the body of visions to be able to radiate and absorb they have an upward movement and a downward movement. I think that's a good start. I think that's a good start. So one of the things, the reason I like to say this is how I've sort of formulated it, mostly for this class actually, is because like in New Age terminology, or even in kind of semi-scientific or traditional yoga terminology, there's this idea that your chakras should be open. And that's great. When we're talking about the idea of these granthis, these knots, we do want to pierce those knots, right? In the classic yoga tradition, this is called Mahavedha, the great piercing, you pierce through those knots. So in that sense, yes, you want these chakras to be open, right? Walking around with a clenched heart, there's never really a time when that's a great idea, a clenched heart, right? But then when we get to like, is there ever a time when your heart should be defended? Probably. Probably a good idea. I saw online the other day, this person's self-defense school, and they do a women's self-defense class, and they have this exercise where at the end they watch a movie, and you throw popcorn at the screen every time there's like a boundary violation, when somebody should be saying no, but things have gotten weird. So they're like watching Twilight, right? And it's just popcorn the whole time. But I was like, what a great idea. Wow. Because we're trained, and like, that's another example of media, just training young girls to like disregard blatant, weird boundary violations, so there's a big controversy with ISTA, right? International School of Tantric something or other. I don't know what their name is, and it's kind of about this paradigm, as I understand. I don't want to be on the gossip train. Don't tell me about any of what's happening. But as I know from association with these type of lineages myself, I don't know. Am I getting into gossip? I'm not sure. But often there seems to be a paradigm that's like, oh, you have boundary about that? Well, that's because that's a closure in that second chakra center. Don't you want that to be open? And then the answer is, please come screw the teacher, which is like, depending on the type of hierarchical relationships cannot have actual consent in them, right? And so that's a big problem. Like, you use this pivot, chakra should be open, yours is not. So deny your inner knowing and engage in a consent violation, right? And these are just normalized things. So I do want to say, while I won't use the language of that chakras should be closed, because we're talking on these multiple valences of meaning, right? We do always want to open those granthis, but if the knot at your sacrum opens, I think you'll have great boundaries with your sexual energy. I think you'll kick people right in the shin if they like engage in consent violations with others on your watch. And that means that chakra is open, not closed. So, but for now, we could say that they can radiate. And that's probably what we mean when we say like, oh, they should be open. We want them to be radiating, but they can also consolidate. Which means going this way. And then important for our study, language that I would like to encourage you to explore is that they have an upward trajectory and a downward trajectory, and both of those are important. So let's get into it. At your pelvic floor, if you smile with your inner smile and direct that awareness to your pelvic floor, maybe your sit bones, depending on how you're sitting, the back of your glutes, top of your hamstrings. You'll be smiling into your root center. And then right at the middle of that, like if you were to hone in, where's the very center of my pelvic floor? Ding! this would kind of be like what we would call the chakra center proper, that place which would be pierced by this pranic current if we were cultivating in that paradigm of the great piercing. So this is this root center. Its Sanskrit name is called Muladhara. 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 And its name, Mula, means root. Mula means root. This is just a mini Sanskrit lesson in case you need it. It really helps. I was really helped having studied New Age chakra stuff when I went into Buddhism, because then all the book titles and stuff, they're like, oh, and then we study the Mula Prajna and the Mula Madhyamaka. I'm like, that's the root of wisdom, the root of the middle way. I know that. It's a chakra. I know that guy from work. So really fun. Okay, Muladhara means root support or root foundation. Root support or root foundation. And so its name tells you everything you need to know about this center. The other thing that you might want to know is that we can work with these as little spots or bindus or dots on the body or areas, but in our Qigong practice, how this works, these are my tree guys? Oh, I hope so. How this works is that this center tends to open like the shape of my legs here, like a funnel that goes down and then merges with the earth, merges with the earth. So you could say, oh, there's a transpersonal chakra underneath. Sometimes we visualize it like that. Or you could just say that that's all the root chakra. From here down, becoming planet Earth is all part of this Muladhara energy. Let me just look at this. Nope, it's the mailman, not the arborist. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Oh, the arborist is a person in your neighborhood. A person that you meet each day. Boom, boom. Excuse me. Okay. So this is apparently mail comes on Sunday. I don't know. I think Amazon like paid them to send mail on a Sunday or something. So, all right, good for you, atheists who want overtime. Like, let's go for it. So Muladhara, root support. Its color symbolically is said to be red. Its color is said to be red. Its element symbolically is said to be the earth element. Its animal is an elephant. Its animal is an elephant. And why? Well, the elephant is a great place to start, because if I actually looked, I had to review some stuff and I tried to find things on the internet, and you'll see a bunch of people's blogs and they give the correspondences in what I would call that materialistic or gross orientation. It's like the root chakra is this, it's this element, this means this is this, and now you know, as if like collecting the knowledge and putting it on your shelf does anything for your spirit, right? So what we have to know is, like, if you brought to mind an elephant, you just thought about like, ooh, the coolest, most majesticest elephant ever. Okay, then what qualities come to your awareness? What feeling tones come to your awareness when you think of an elephant? What do you say? Yeah, Jim does this, right? There's this heavy, weighty kind of deal. What else do you think? Can you tell me? Elephant. Soft strength. Yeah, because it's an elephant. They can be soft, huh? I forgot that they can be soft. Memory. Yeah. And these roots are kind of like deep, earthy bone genetic memory, perhaps. Interesting. Didn't think of that one myself. They can also be quite destructive if left to their not left to their own devices, but if their environment are manipulated by human beings, usually they can be quite destructive. Yeah, connection protective, right? They're family creatures. They're like big old family creatures. They're big feelers, right? So all of this, when you think of all that, then one practice would be tune back into that pelvic floor region. And you could either imagine the idealized elephant in that area of your body, or you could imagine like the strength of an elephant. All of those qualities are inhabiting or empowering that space in your root. Actually feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Okay, you got it. You get the idea. So this is one of the ways of, like I said, you can learn these correspondences anywhere, but very few people are actually teaching like the inner alchemical work, that why these correspondences are there. And so as we get this is how you would use this for the work aspect. So red in color, it is the earth element. It's associated with an elephant. There are gods and deities that live in these things too. We're not going there too much. I'm too much of a Buddhist now to even remember what those are supposed to be. But if you want to look up some of the symbolism, you could try to read Carl Jung's book on Kundalini and psychology, the psychology of Kundalini yoga. Just look up Carl Jung Kundalini, you'll find it. You could try that. I read it like 20 years ago now, and it was cool. It was cool, but you don't have to. You don't have to. So, and but let's do just the list making here. Its Bij mantra is LUM, LAM, LUM, LUM, LUM. Why is that the Bij mantra for this? Well, you could feel it, and you might have a sense that like, ooh, as you lum, there's like a, but that doesn't quite do it for me, because I studied with these Sufis, and they were always going Allah, Allah, and using that same sound to cleanse the heart. So I'm like, whatever. But it's the Bij mantra because traditionally this is the mantra associated with the earth element. So in at least your first 4 chakras, their mantras are, in all of the Himalayan traditions, these are the mantras of those elements. Also makes it really easy if you get into, like, there's a Buddhist sadhana that we do, like for helping the dying, or helping those who have recently passed. And the first thing you do is you chant the Bij mantras of the elements. But if you didn't take this 7 chakra class, then you're like, okay, yum, ram, blah, and so there's this thing of, as you practice these bidras, we are actually creating an association. And that's what you need for this spiritual work. Like, it's not, I wished back when I was 16, when I was studying like westernized Kabbalistic magic, that you just said the name of God and then like magic happened. Because that's how that Disney movie about Merlin taught me, right? And then I learned the Merlin one too, Udvas, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Didn't do it. The mist didn't roll in consistently. It rolled in a couple times, but it could have been chance. So years and years later, they've taught me how the mantra work is you pair it with your intent. You pair it with your intent, and all it has to be is congruent. So if you can go lum, and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of like a big earth drum. Lum, lum. I could get in that, and in your mind you create that, oh, lum means the earth. Got it. Then it'll work for you in your inner work. And similarly, if you go la, Allah, the ul sound, ooh, it's striking the deepest cockles of my heart, well, that'll work for you too. So this is the sound. Okay, so what did I say in our thing? Practices and pathologies according to associated with this chakra. Oh, symbols. pathologies and practices. Those are the things we want to go over with this chakra. So this root center is all about survival. It's all about survival. It's the fight, flight, and the freeze. Fawning comes later in different chakras, and that other F for the survival of the species, that's one chakra up. So don't worry about those other Fs. But the three big ones, fight, flight, and freeze, are associated with this center. So what you feel, so I'm going to just shift gears from my like, this could all be evidence-based things in the, okay, to totally mystical chi healing stuff, right? What you'll feel is that someone who has dealt with some type of trauma that affects their capacity to survive or thrive on planet Earth will generally have a lack of presence in this center, And so it's really hard to tell what this is going to be. You got to remember the old thing that like trauma is not what happened. It's what happened compared to your resources for integrating what happened, right? So some people have birth trauma, right? And their root chakra is like, whoa, I don't belong on planet Earth. Like some little infant part of their brain is like, nope, I died that day and I'm never showing up actually. And then other people have birth trauma and they're just fine. They're just like, they got this flowering root trauma. They're like, I'm going to be a doula. This is great. So it's not what happened. It's what were your resources to integrate what happened. And so similarly, there are interactions between these centers. Like one of the experiences in my early life that became traumatic was actually about the heart chakra. But it had the effect of pulling up the roots out of this base center. So as we work, the good news is now you don't have to memorize a list of symbolisms and blah, 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 because this is all about work. So as we do our opening the 7 chakras practice, as we do these various sort of self-assessments, then you will find out, oh, hey, I got to work on this root center. And then how do you test that? You do the practices associated with it. And if your life gets better, then you were correct, right? So survival. The other aspect is about, what could we call it? Grounding, or so I might say surviving and thriving on planet Earth. This would be my key phrase for this center: surviving and thriving on planet Earth. Because there are some folks, like if you got half a root chakra, you can remember to feed yourself and brush your teeth, but you can't floss. It's impossible with half a root chakra to floss, right? Or maybe you can, but you forget to pay your taxes. And then what happens is years and years later, the tax bill comes due and you retract that root chakra even more because you go, oh no, it's not safe. I'm always under threat. So if you want to know one of the toxic mantras to purge out of this system, it is, I'm always under threat. Right? This is one of the encodings that live in there. So that's why if somebody had a birth trauma, and that's what got, pre-verbally into their little infant brain, oh crap, I'm always under threat, we can continue to perpetuate throughout our lives, right? This can come into self-sabotage, as you know, like, why don't you ever pay your taxes? I just don't think about it. Meanwhile, this little baby's going, well, because we're always under threat. I have to create the circumstances that continue to reaffirm my assumptions about life. That's not just a new age idea, right? This has been documented pretty well by psychological research, that we go about picking partners that mirror some of those worst things that our parents did. It's just like, it's a statistical phenomenon. And similarly, well, you've heard me talk about perceptual selectivity and blah, 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 blah. So we don't need to do that. But this is the toxic affirmation that can live in there that we want to reframe, retrain, rewire, which is this sense I'm always under threat. So if it's a little bit open, you can survive, but not necessarily thrive on planet Earth. So how do we get this thing open? I'm kind of riffing. I don't have a big plan about how this will go. We're going to go through the whole ladder. So we'll just see. I may have to come back to a chakra back and forth. We'll see. So how do you get this thing to open? Well, this is one of my specialities in helping young yogins who don't have any root chakra. They're all heart. And thus their life and their relationships just always go to crap. And because like it's a really clear pattern, right? So how do you get this thing open? Well, we are going to have to somehow create experiences that contradict the toxic mantra, I am always under threat, right? This is going to be your basic marching orders to help this root chakra get into a healthy state. So what's interesting is that you can be losing the life of your physical body and have a thriving root chakra. And this has to do with how you identify yourself, because these are spiritual or psycho-emotional structures, right? So it has to do with who's the I who is under threat, right? Who's the I who is under threat, right? Because for some people, it's like, oh no, 4th stage cancer. Could have called that one. That was on my bingo card. Duh. For other people, they're like, oh, here's the next part of my journey. And the interesting thing is that the I who they feel they are does not feel threatened by that event. The I who they feel they are does not feel threatened by that event. How cool. So, just so esotericism warning, right? But the neat part is that when these psycho-emotional centers in our body are open, we do have a lot greater health. Why? Because we're not constricting them and cutting off blood flow and like telling our own immune system to hurt ourselves and all of the things that can happen when we've locked trauma and impacted these centers. But the good news is like, even should terrible things happen, right? You lost a lower limb or something like that. If you don't think that's you, you can go through that experience without assuming that your survival is threatened. It's really quite weird. So these are these keys of these sort of ancient spiritual athletes to change the center of gravity of identity without becoming a spiritual bypasser. Right? Because the spiritual bypassing move is to go, oh, well, I'm always under threat. Maybe there's somewhere I can escape to where I won't always be under threat. This move is to say, maybe there's a way of being that is unthreatenable. Something like that. So this is one of the ideas, is to begin to find how to counter this toxic mantra that I am always under threat. Now, best case, so I started there because best case scenarios are not guaranteed in this life, right? We've been talking all this yoga and central channel stuff, so I can't just tell you like, so we just create the right circumstances. We create a safe environment. We get people away from the addicts in their life and the abusers in their life and the narcissists in their life. And that's how you heal the root chakra. Like, that would be great, dude. That would be great. But like, you finally do that for yourself. And then you realize that climate change is hitting the catastrophic part of its stride. And all of a sudden, like, you're like, but my root chakra, I worked so hard to assemble all the conditions for my root chakra. how dare you, right? You find that, oh, I've got the best spiritual community around. I've got the community that will make me feel safe. Oh, warning sign. That will make me feel safe. And now I can finally do the work to heal my root chakra, right? And then Trump gets elected. Okay, whatever your views are on that. But then all of your friends, no, 30% of your friends turn out to be really mean homophobes in secret, pretending to be like chakra yogis. What happened to your work on your root chakra? It's really rough if you think external circumstances are the answer. So the only reason I'm starting with this is because for you yogins, the only thing you really get to influence is your state, right? You get to influence your stance, your state. So if you can find an identity within that is not threatenable, this is the way that we can sustain a brilliantly radiant, functional root center. Okay, so then walking it back from that, if you're working with a client and they can change their environment so that they don't feel like they're being threatened, this is one of the concrete steps to do this. And that term, concrete steps, is another one you might want to put an asterisk by. So clients who have the spiritual bypassing phenomena with a weakness in this center, they'll tend to want to think about or feel about how to make these changes in their lives. And it won't ever occur to them to make a list of what the concrete steps are to make positive change in their life. It just won't even, they'll have an epiphany in the session and they'll go, oh, wow, Miko, I mean, like you're the best golden shadow I could have imagined projecting on. And this is just so great. And then they'll go back and make no changes in their lives. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they don't have a root chakra. They don't think in terms of concrete changes, right? So if you're working with a client in this way, and this is where it comes into your empathy dojo, this is where it comes into your vocal coaching, into your acupuncture, you can assume this, even if you're not doing like, ooh, palpate the energy centers, but we're learning this map, right? And when it's like, hey, you're going to need to do this for that change that you want. And then they go, whoa, that really makes sense. And then they always come back and never do it. It's because they may not know how to make concrete steps from where I am now to this thing. And even like the practice you gave them is over here, and they don't know yet how to make a reminder in their phone, or like that they have to go and actually throw all the sugary stuff that they say they don't like out of their cupboards and buy replacements for that. They don't think about that because when this center is not functioning, we don't think in practical terms. We don't think in practical terms, right? So concrete steps, put an asterisk by it in your notes because it can help you. It's helped me, and it can help your friends. The other way you may notice this in yourself, so likely y'all are grown-ups. You had to pay to get to this class. And so I know you are capable of a few concrete steps toward your own surviving and thriving. We've all got a little room to grow, I'm sure. But what you may notice in your case is, it's a real ouch point in the holistic healing community, is that your concrete steps come in fits and starts. And it's because, okay, I'm going to say something that's getting obnoxious because people say it so often. It's because your concrete steps are a trauma response. And so you go, oh God, I've got to lose the weight or I'm going to get freaking heart disease and a pancreas problem. And so then you go on this madcap fasting mixed with panchakarma thing that you came up with. And you can only do that for 10 days because your body is getting severely nutrient deficient, right? Regardless of what theory, that's not grounded in any evidence that we read that made it say, oh, I feel that, yes. And then you made some practical steps and you did them all at once. And now you're exhausted because you've got decision and willpower fatigue, and the plan you were doing was a little bit ungrounded, right? This is one, it slips on, I do this, it's, and it slips under the radar because usually the stuff that we're trying to do is positive, right? It's life affirming, it's thriving oriented, but we do it in a way that's divorced from how reality works. Reality tends to work more like Weight Watchers than like radical Ayurvedic fasting protocol or something like that. Ayurveda I know told me don't fast, but that's bad for your Agni, dude. But we do it, right? Because we're like, oh yeah, I'm going to survive. I'm going to clean this house. I'm going to get myself in shape. I'm going to go on a retreat. I'm going to get enlightened, and then I can survive. That is anti-root chakric activity and thinking. Does that make sense? The fits and starts phenomenon? Yeah, if we're doing concrete steps from problematic orientation, totally. And here in root chakra zone, like with a client, I wouldn't necessarily even try to get into them with problematic orientation, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, we're suffering. Like this realm sucks. Like you find the love of your life, and like eventually one of you is going to die. Like that's just how, so far at least, I haven't seen evidence to the contrary yet. Maybe there's some, maybe Babaji will come and tell me different. But thus far, even when you get it, you're like, oh yes, a twin flame hood. Like somebody's got to die first, or you both die together. Like that's the realm we're living in, and getting square with that, which is also one of the symbols of the root chakra, getting square with that reality is grounding, so, and this is not to pick on the language of it. I think that's fine. Probably what you're thinking is probably just fine, but just to jump off of there, when working with a client and they're like, oh, everything sucks and blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm not going to try to help them with their problematic orientation. I'm going to try to help them with the toxic affirmation that says like, I'm always under threat, right? That's it. And so if I need to be problematic about that, like I always seem to keep ending up with these same type of assholes. Yes, that's a problem. That is a problem. Get rid of the assholes. You don't, because the other thing in here now, when we get like abuse and shame and things like that, is the toxic affirmation turns into, I deserve to always be under threat. Right. So you have these different levels, like birth trauma and things like that will tend to tell a person, oh, I'm always under threat. It's just an assumption. But then when you have abandonment issues, or when you have various shame, even injuries, right? Like early injuries or illness, because kids, we're all kind of naturally religious, no matter how atheistic your family might be. And so we assume like, oh, I'm sick because God or the universe or Gaia on this deep subconscious level. And so we might end up with this, I deserve to always be under threat. And then if you can't find a boyfriend to do it, you'll take up skydiving. Something like that. And that might be healthy, depending, you might have to go like, no, I just need adrenaline rush. That's how my system is built. That's great. But other folks, they will do things that are bound to give them injuries and then wonder why they're always in the hospital. And it's because we got to get these toxic mantras. We got to recognize they're in there and then counteract them. So one way, concrete steps, and they're sustainable. So I guess that second one we could boil down to sustainable concrete steps or action plans, right? Yes, these are cognitive distortions. Oh yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of this. Psychophysically, what you'll notice and what you'll hear through Rolf, this can give you sacrum pain, tailbone pain, knee pain, foot issues, motility issues in the legs, and low back pain. Don't think because it's way up there in your low back, it's not your root chakra. Why? Because Muladhara, the root support, right? So this is like the foundation of your structure. And in shiatsu, I started to notice this pattern where if someone had gone through a breakup or lost a job or things like that, their back would go out. And what I tended to find, this is sort of intuitive anecdotal, was that it felt in their psyche like the foundation of the rest of their life just dissolved, and their body acted that out by not being able to uphold its structure. And then why I think I was right on in that is because I told them about that and they went, oh, and then their back pain started getting better. So a great book on this that you might like is Sarno is the guy's last name. And I think it used to be called Healing Back Pain. And then they changed the title to like the Mind Body Solution or something like that. But anyway, Sarno's work, really cool. People were coming with debilitating back pain. And his whole method was to say that like when that back pain starts to crop up, think, I bet I'm repressing my emotions right now. Like that was his whole intervention, as I remember the book. I bet this is repressed emotions. And then they felt their emotions and their back pain went away. Sarnohla, what? Oh, cool method, right? So in this case, it's not that, let's not get our materialistic orientation, that back pain means you've got a faulty root chakra. No, you might have a faulty second chakra, buddy. And maybe let's not say faulty about the sacred power centers of our body. But it does mean that practitioners have noted that when it feels like the foundation is eroding, that I can't find solid ground, my core has been shook, right? This is one I found we associated in shiatsu with the heart meridian, is that when people say, like, oh, that shook me to my core or something like that, there's a type of like heartbreak or shock that made their back go out. But in this class, that's a root chakra issue. So energetic healing wise, what we do, we learn this with some of those chakras in our general treatment protocol, but basically below the knees, but between the feet, you're just holding presence with energy, and you kind of feed energy to that center, and it usually helps the thing to open back up. Okay, so survival, the toxic mantras, etc. And then we'll talk about a little bit of the up and down of it more later. But this is just one thing to say to introduce this idea. It's the language I'm playing with to describe a phenomena that I've noticed, because in the yogic tradition, the whole notion is on the upward trajectory of these centers, right? So this root center, the whole point is to pierce it and get to the next one up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until you open this one, boo! And then like the introduction of the Hatha Yoga Pradipaka says, those great siddhas have cracked the cosmic egg. They are destroyers of death, and now they wander freely about the universe. So one of the old yogas is that your consciousness rises successively through these centers, boop, pops out top of the head, and then you never have to come home. And it may be that there is a transformation of consciousness that is like that. That's not the goal of non-dual traditions that say it's not a problem that you're here in a body, right? Because we don't have problematic orientation. We say, oh, is it where you are? Yeah. Well, then it's where you're supposed to be. What are you going to do with it? That's more of the non-dual orientation. But this root chakra, as the earth element, you could say is like the bottommost point of gross identification. So when we're talking about the upward trajectory, and this is one of the meanings of the phenomena of Kundalini, when they say to awaken the Kundalini through these centers and all the way up to the top, what they mean is we are awakening out of gross identification through subtle, causal, and non-dual, right? So that would be the upward aspect of this root center. And that's when you come across it in a yogic context, that's primarily what they're going to be talking about. Then everything that we just talked about is more the downward aspect of that root center, which is, can I put down roots? Can I be nourished by life in a body? Can I survive and thrive in whatever conditions? Can I bring thriving to whatever conditions I find myself in? And can I make concrete plans that deal with concrete stuff? Be okay with that. That would be more the downward aspect of this chakra. Okay, so you've got these energetics. Those are your interventions. Teach people how to make plans. And the other ones, things like resourcing activities, like we learned in the Compassion Alchemy project, in like the somatic tradition, right? Is you do, when you can create conditions for the body to feel safe, for the body to feel nourished, for you to feel thriving, you create those situations, and then you savor them and you build those up like a resource, like a stockpile of positive, enjoyable, thriving situations, right? And this is going to be one of your best remedial ways to work this root center, right? So what people have access to is going to be different for everyone. Some people are just going to have to go to like find a sense of self that is thriving and thus can't be threatened. Like that's all they have. That's Viktor Frankl's method, right? That's what he did to survive a concentration camp. Is he went, you can kill the rest of this, but you can't kill how I think about it. Ha ha ha, I win. Right? And like, I win is great for a root chakra. It's a great feeling for that root chakra. So finding a win, wresting victory from the jaws of defeat, right, is the counter to what many of us have been programmed to do, which is to wrest defeat from the jaws of victory. Right? Through our own cognitive distortions, we place distress onto situations that we could have thrived our way through, right? So these are some of these fundamental skills, right? And then if we can, we help to get people out of toxic environments. We helped, hey, I've heard that if you eat before you have coffee, then it doesn't do a big cortisol dump. And it actually might reduce your anxiety, Oh, wow, you want to give up coffee? Here's a concrete plan to deal with caffeine withdrawal, step by step by step, right? So we can start to work with creating safety in that way. And then as well, just in your office, like whether you're doing medical Qigong or whether you're doing, let's say, the vocal coaching, right? You might actually be having a great influence on somebody's root center because you're willing to use their pronouns. Right? Like, oh, those are your pronouns now? They were different last week, but you know what? Just give me a second. I'm going to get used to this. I'm going to use them. And all of a sudden, there's a space where I can thrive, where life is not trying to eliminate me. And then obviously for us, because you're yogis here, and then we'll finish this one for now, you can go out and vote in a way that promotes the thriving of others, right? We can be because one of the things about this system is actually, it's not the chakra of interdependence, interconnection so much, but it's the roots are going into Gaia, and that's our shared reality. And survival is a system, right? So we don't look at people who are in patterns of addiction and we go like, wow, how are you creating this for yourself, right? Because if I'm not voting or destroying public property or whatever activism techniques you do to undermine the conditions that promote that addiction, then I am helping you to create that for yourself. So just a little plug, how to do chakra stuff without being a privileged God realm American is to promote systems that help others thrive and survive. Okay, so that's fun. Let's do the next one. I'll call it the sacral chakra, or sometimes I just say the second chakra. And this is your lower belly area. So if you smile into, basically, a great way to find this is to smile into your whole sacrum. And then if you smile forward, you'll notice that's also the realm of your pubic bone and your reproductive organs. And just see if you can just kind of feel into that area. Okay, so this center, its name is Svadhisthana. I think that's how many H's are in this one, Svadhisthana. And Svadhisthana, I'm very grateful. Okay, so just the nerdy part of me, I hope it serves you. Is very grateful to tell you the accurate translation for this word, because if you look it up from like respected yoga teachers, they're like, oh, and this translates to her favorite abiding place or something like that. It means the seat of the self. The literal Sanskrit means the seat of the self. Sthana is like, I believe, the same root word that went into Pakistan and Kurdistan and all of these. It means sthana, the seat, and sva is the ancient root word for self. So this is the seat of the self. What does that relate to? It relates to the everything we were talking about yesterday with that lower Dan Tiens. So the idea of creating a new center of gravity that is, oh, this is my self. So before you can surrender your ego, you have to have a decently functional one to surrender. This one isn't really the ego center as it shows up. That's much more in the next one up, but this is the seat. So if you think about just in the inner body structure, if you think about this as like, if there were actually a seat in here, here's where the self rests its bum, and then here's where the rest of the self sits. So this is seat of the self. And then Manipura in the navel is actually, they call the watchtower of the jewel, which is that little pearl that we've been creating in our Qigong. So the watchtower up here and the seat down here. And you this is the fullness of your self that they're talking about. Okay, so that's fun. And as we learn these Sanskrits, yeah, and Jim, that might be, you're looking at a microcosmic chart there, right? So the second chakra might be where the little kids are turning the water wheels down by the bottom. That's often associated more with the root, but it's associated with your second chakra because those are your ovaries or your testicles. So the water wheels that make the river run backwards are the sexual force. And that is the second chakra's main deal. Okay, so what do we mean by sexual force? Well, we mean vitality. Let's use the word eros. Let's use the word eros because it has a sexual connotation, but it also has a bit of just like a lust for life kind of connotation, right? So that's the feeling in the center. And the reason why this is the stimulus for that microcosmic orbit, which is very similar to the inner fire practices, is because we want this spark of like, oh yeah, juicy stuff. If you don't have that, what in the hell are you going to run up into the higher centers to transform? This is the raw fuel of the spiritual experiences of those higher centers. So this is why in many of the tantric systems, they are based on a healthy relationship to one's sexuality or sexual energy. And they can be celibate or non-celibate, monogamous or non-monogamous, but the whole idea is taking what down here is just the erotic impulse and realizing that that same impulse at these various stations on the way up is the eros of our open-hearted compassion and is the eros of the expression of our will and our true voice, and is the eros of penetrating insight. Okay, so Svadhisthana, seat of the self. It is generally visualized with an orange color, because it's related to the water element. Obviously, no, that's not obvious, is it? But that is what it's related to. And that's because these things are non-material. They're symbolic. So the orange should feel like flickering candlelight. Ooh. Or a delicious bottle of fine honey mead to intoxicate your senses and perhaps that of a festive new friend. That particular golden hour sunset. Miko just posted a photo montage on her Facebook of various golden hours at sunset. That's the color of this center, right? So if you were to feel that, if you were to feel back into that sacral and genital area, and you put candlelight sunset in there with a bottle of honey mead, ooh, girl. Ooh, yeah. So what it's meant to do, just like we did with the elephant, right, is it's meant to cultivate that honeyed feeling, or that warm light, that's sitting by the firelight, enjoying it's honey mead again, enjoying your glass of honey mead while the sun gently sets and my guitar gently weeps, or whatever's going on. Okay, so water element. So that the color and the element don't necessarily bring their congruence, but the feeling of both of those is lending itself toward, it's kind of like we did with when we studied the 5 elemental associations in Taoism, right? It's like we have metal and lungs and the corporeal spirit and the skin and the autumn and grief and integrity. None of those are it. But if you felt into all of those, the thing that they sort of all have in common is your guidepost to what that element is like, what the energy of that element is like. So similarly here, if you can feel what that sunset candlelight orange and water have in common, it'll get you to the feeling of what the energetics of this center are like. So what the water element in this case is like, if you have a crush on somebody, there's a melting and emerging that happens, ideally, isn't it? I mean, if it's a reciprocated crush, right? You've got a crush on them, they've got a crush on you, and then the candlelight and the mead and the firelight, and one thing led to another, and there's finally the kissing, and it's like water washing into one another, right? So this is the quality of that water element, and it's because as the root chakra could be said to be the survival center, a quick way to say this one is that this is the relational center. This is the relational center. Okay, now don't get confused with what we said yesterday, whereas this was the relational center, because that we only had 3 to work with there. So now we got 7. So it's different. Okay, just put that aside, reconcile it later. This is your relational center because of these elements, right? And so this is a center like, oh, if we're dancing, if we're romancing, this center is going to be online, right? And if you're at the club and you're dancing and nobody seems to be wanting to romance with you, check. Is my pelvis existing? Is it moving? Is it soft and flowing like water? Or have I like rigidified that? So this is this center. It is not only sexual relationships that happen in the center, but relationships in general. When my teacher was showing us some Taoist candle magic, I didn't even know there was such a thing when I graduated from being a druid to being a Taoist. But it's the same thing. It's using these congruence of symbols to affect our deep unconscious mind, which then helps us to affect our own reality. He was saying, if you want to invoke a spiritual teacher, you use an orange candle. And he explained it. He said, why? Because that's the most important relationship there is. So this was, the tradition was, yeah, you use an orange candle. But you might be like, why an orange candle? Because it's about relationality. Some have said too that the saffron color of monks' robes is actually to help them purify the energy of this center. So saffron colored monk's robe are for brahmacharis. These are for celibate practitioners, but they're actually using this tantric color therapy to help them regulate the energies of these centers. So yeah, it's not about Halloween unless Halloween's particularly romantic for you, in which case, oh, but it can get spooky down here. It can get spooky down here. So the aminal that you want to know about is the crocodile. Its symbolic aminal is the crocodile, or maybe it's an alligator, whichever one you might find near India. But it's an underwater tooth master, and this one, you know, Jung figured out pretty quick, right? Is that the water element is not only the flowing, excuse me, aspect of our relationships, but it is also the depths of our unconscious, and powerful urges can unseen emerge from the depths of that unconscious and snatch you up and drag you under. So this is actually, yeah, probably not a crocodile on that microcosmic orbit picture, but this is where we were just talking about breath work and catharsis. And when that goes haywire, that's the crocodile. That's the crocodile snatching you from the depths, right? So the symbolism here, in the breath work, that's that vitality that you're cultivating. That's this second chakra. That's the erotic force. And we breathe in, more erotic force, but it's also your subconscious. And you might get a crocodile or a shark or a depth dwelling spook monster, tooth monster. Okay, so this center is all about relationships, and it's all about subtle energy. So obviously in a clinical setting in Qigong, we would work on this center, or you would find that this center is, what I find generally is that it's either weak or over diffuse. So that can happen in folks. I've seen like to counteract what some Taoists and yogins will tell you, I've met like pretty slutty polyamorous types with really healthy second chakras. Okay, it's not the relational style that does it, right? Because there's, you know, in some of these traditions, they're like, oh no, if you're not naturally monogamous, then, you know, that's a problem with your root chakra. That's not actually the case. It's usually more about your ethics and your awareness than it is anything else. But sometimes people who are deriving a seat of the self from relationships, right? This can be one of the reasons. Maybe a person wants to be monogamous. That might be healthy for them, but they can't, because they constantly have to be going out and finding a new relationship to give them a new sense of self. In that case, what it feels like energetically is that the second chakra is kind of like this. It gets a little tendrily. On the other hand, folks who have been in unhealthy relationships at any point in their life can have had this center traumatized, and it feels like it's wary, right? It does not want to engage in the world. And we can do all sorts of cool things as humans, right? So sometimes folks, you'll feel or see that this is underdeveloped, but then they've got this enormous third chakra, right? They've got this enormous solar plexus. And you go, oh, well, no wonder your marriage is still working, even though your subtle body is like totally terrified of any authentic relating, because they're relating on the sense of their personality. And they can even be a nice person. Like if in that scenario, you know, you might find is like, oh no, they get along with their husband fine, the blah, 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 blah. They just have these panic attacks, just some pesky panic attacks, you know, and you'll find that it's like they've constructed a moderately healthy sense of self in order to be able to do something that meets human needs, but which is absolutely terrifying and threatening to them on this deeper level, right? So in our work, we would just want to bolster that second chakra, right? We're not trying to catharsisize them like, hey, you've got repressed material. No, let's just pour some honey-colored light in there, see what happens. Oh, hey, wow, so relationship, and this can be any kind of relationship. So this can be friendships, right? Like, self-revelation. If I were to feel into my second chakra, it's a little weak on the friendship spot because I'm so picky, very picky. Because there's trauma in there that needs to be worked out. And so if I'm like, okay, so I'll just do a live example on you, or on me, for you, with you, on me. You make me nervous. But I could be like, so, I'm not out of touch with this subtle body, but like most of us who experiment with spiritual technology, I have plenty of issues as well. And if I were one of the ways we can work with, like, so mine is like, I did this retreat a while ago. It was the wrong practice for me. I still have some ramifications like trickling down years later. One of the tactics by which you can help with that is you can go through and scan like, oh, well, what's the balance in these centers, right? And if I found, oh, my second chakra is sort of underdeveloped, that might make a lot of sense, right? Because one of my challenges I'm working out is like, I tend to have a little too much going this way, like 45 degrees up from my heart. My energy body is built a little bit like that, and it's not all that great for me. So it would make sense that if I could do more down here, that would actually balance that out. But the symbology, like if I looked at like, okay, what's my relationship with my partner? Well, that's fine. How about sex? I think sex is just fine. Well, what about friends? Oh shit. And usually it's the things that you don't want to work on, or which are in your blind spot, which are going to give you the most mileage in this work. So for me, I would want to go in with that piece of knowledge, and I go like, oh wow, and just take my energetic practice, but also my introspective practice, be like, well, where are my blind spots in my relationships? And as we get into the various visualizations and things you can do in these centers, those show up or are visualized, depending on how evidence-based you want to be in your language. To a mystic, they show up as where the petals of those lotus are undeveloped, or where the spokes of that wheel are crimped and imbalanced. And so what I would want to do is, if I were to feel into this chakra, right, it's like, oh wow, the back spokes are like not doing their thing. And so energetically, I could smooth that out. But what I know is that those structures in the subtle body anatomy are my blockages to healthy friendships. Okay, so here's your keyword: intimacy, right? The word I'm looking for here, thanks, I had to do a whole session on myself to get to the word I was supposed to teach you about the damn chakra, is intimacy. Into me I see. Right? And so as healthy as this center is, will be as healthy as any of your intimacy is, and vice versa. That makes sense, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Some of this is old news, but I hope, I'm just kind of like channeling whatever comes through. Hopefully it'll just send off little pings that expand your practice. Okay, so symptoms obviously will show up in the urogenital and reproductive system. Symptoms will obviously show up in the urogenital and reproductive system. Does that mean, oh no, I've got cervical dysplasia, and then we should tell them, well, how are you with intimacy? No, don't do that. And there are viruses like that may or may not have to do with how stressed you are and where the patterns of stress constrict in your body, but they may also not. And it's just a virus and it's fine. Like, get a procedure. I have found medical Qigong to help a lot with this. And usually it's about cleaning out the second chakra and the root chakra. And I've seen cervical dysplasia go away and ovarian cysts shrink. But I'm still not going to tell people that their ovarian cyst is because they've got intimacy issues. That's not nice. That would be me having an intimacy issue if I said that. So don't do that. There's also such a thing as bad luck. There's also such a thing as genetics, right? So when we work with these psycho-emotional currents, we're taking best advantage of what luck we have. We're taking best advantage of our genetics, right? Just like, you know, my family has got the fat genes. I think that science is too old, but if they exist, my family's got them. And I know that stress or self-loathing makes that worse. Those are contributors to obesity. So it would behoove me, I think I used that word correctly, what a fun word. I would have hooves if I kept myself in good relationship with myself and like tried not to stress out too much so that I don't turn on more of those fat genes or however it works. But if I started gaining weight and then my friends all said, wow, I guess you really must not like yourself, that's what is clinically called a dick move. And it's also not accurate. So don't do that. Okay, so with that said, I have to give these, right? Because it's in, when we talk about, yes, if you think about it, like if you're constricting emotionally around this area, then the type of blood flow you need to keep all those tissues healthy is not going to be there. And that can contribute to those problems. But there are other causes. Thanks for letting me say my piece. I just feel responsible to say these things these days. So then, though, things like erectile dysfunction are much more psychologically attuned, right? Things like failing to climax are much more psychologically attuned, right? And again, don't be a jerk who's like not a sex therapist and you're going to try to tell people that, hey, no, it's your intimacy. No, but if they tell you that's their problem and you're doing medical Qigong, don't be surprised when the second chakra is the one to work on, and don't be surprised when that does help them. And then as well, should the context arise, you can teach them, like, what do you know about developing healthy intimacy? And sometimes their erectile dysfunction will just go away. And their premature ejaculation issue will not be a premature ejaculation issue anymore. In Taoism, that's because the second chakra area energy center and the one in the heart aren't talking to each other. And so the energy that's supposed to rise up and turn into love and compassion can't rise up because it's blocked off by those blocks to intimacy. And so it just has to go out the minute you get stimulated. So cool, man, you know, but that's where that'll show up. Okay, also low back pain. You can, because here in the sacroiliac joint and as well in the hips, it would seem like, oh wait, root chakra in the back, second chakra in the hips. Isn't that flip-flop? No. Why? Because the hips are those watery, dancing, dirty dancing with Patrick Swayze and Jennifer, whatever her name is. Nobody puts baby in the corner, and nobody better put your hips in the corner either. And so if that goes offline, again, of course, you may not have moved enough because you're an American and you sit around all the time. And so then your hip fell apart and you have to have it replaced. It's fine. Grandma, we're not going to tell you about how's your intimacy, okay? But also if your friend is like, man, I've been stiffening up. And you go, you know, didn't they just have a hard breakup? And then they're your buddy. And so you're thinking like, how am I going to suggest to them that their stiff hips might be because of intimacy stuff without sounding like a jerk or a total new ager? And you might find a way to bring that up in conversation, and it might actually help them. Okay, but lacking that, you can teach them some Tai Chi. Okay, so that's a little bit on the Svadhisthana. We got the element. Oh, it's Bij mantra that we'll do later is Vam. Vam with a V-A-M. And that's because that is the Bij mantra of the water element. But it has that same thing as like the orange. It's like va 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 voom. Wow. It's the second chakra. Svadhisthana, baby. So it's meant to cultivate that watery type of vibe. Yeah, babam. Okay, so that's that. We're about to go to lunch. But before we do, we have a couple minutes, and I would just love to hear questions, talkbacks, insights, or anything about this section. We're just kind of going up the ladder, talking to our chakra friends, and we'll do a little bit of extra practice about it this afternoon. Correlations between hip pain and menstrual cramping that doesn't outwardly appear to have any particular source. Could there be some kind of relationship here? Yeah, hip, well, I mean, if it were me, I would go, oh, wow, well, both of those are second chakra. How might I inquire into that center, right? So that those could be connected in that way. Then on the more material version, right, if they're like, wow, well, your hormones seem fine. You don't have endometriosis, like that kind of no particular source, right? I mean, you did the progesterone cream. There's no fibroid here. We ultrasounded. We don't know. Then what I would do is I would check the psoas muscle, which is a major mover of your hip and also a deep muscle of your abdomen. And what I've just experienced in my own massage practice is that sometimes trigger points in the psoas can actually activate like trigger point type things in the womb itself, and releasing the psoas can sometimes release menstrual cramps. Similarly, the points on the back of the sacrum, they're not exactly physically connected, but to the front of the sacrum is the sacrouterine ligaments, or I forget all the names of them, but and you can get trigger points on those points on the back of the sacrum that seem to go along the uterine ligament and into the womb. And so I put the lacrosse ball in there. Those are classical treatment points in Chinese medicine for releasing the womb as well as the lower intestine. And those are some great places to look just kind of physically. And then what we do in traditional Chinese medicine is we do all that physically, but while you're doing that with your hands, you're feeling what are the energetics. And you go, oh, this might be an intimacy thing. Well, I'm not their therapist. I can't tell, but I can hit these points that help regulate old emotions. I could send them to so-and-so. I could inquire, what do you think about this? Or often while you're working, insights will come to them. You'll find the point, they go, whoa, that refers into my womb. Okay, cool. Well, let's stay with it. Let's see if we can get you released. And they'll go like, whoa, why am I thinking about my boyfriend from when I was 13 years old? And, that's when you would talk about it. So it's not to go like, maybe you don't have a good sex life and that's why you hurt. No, never say that. But if they go like, whoa, some of my first sexual experiences were really sketchy and I've never even thought about it, then your job after the session might be, here are some safe ways that you might want to go about starting the process of thinking about that, because now it's probably going to come up since it started to. Anyway, does that speak to what you were asking? Some options, some vibes. You can go in and talk to that crocodile. You're like, hey, buddy, what the fuck? And they'll answer you. It's your crocodile, right? It's not some rando crocodile from outside. It's your crocodile. And so you can ask them, what's up with this? And they're like, well, let me tell you, I'm not sure you're ready to hear it, because I'm going to have to tell you in crocodile language, and I can get a little snappy. So yes. Okay, what else we got here? Antidotes for sexual trauma, second chakra, bypassing. Uh-oh. Yeah. Well, what I can say before lunch, slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race, right? So it's all that trauma work, right? Just applied to this. Now, if getting yourself a good friend to guide you through that. And by that, I mean either a professional or someone who, yes, a professional, someone who has the degree of training to help you to relate holistically to the degree of trauma. And then my recommendation is, because this is kind of like that root center in the purity shame kind of vibes, is that you might also have the fits and starts thing of like, oh, I'm going to fix my second chakra trauma, and then I'm going to have good relationships finally, and then I can be a good person. And that makes it worse, right? Because it's enacting the same thing. And so as much as we can, if we can try to bring that self-compassion and set things up to erode shame and build self-love, that's going to be our foundation. And then all of the other stuff, like doing that trigger point work, might be part of it for someone. Doing a healthy version of breath work might be part of it. Doing talk therapy for a number of years and not thinking anything is going on, and then at year 3 going like, holy shit, this was all happening under the surface. That might be what works for someone, right? So all of those are things to consider, but I'm not an expert on that. I should also say. Yeah, I might think of some other yogi stuff for just like pure Qigong in association with whatever therapeutic later. But right now my blood sugar is a little bit bunking. So we'll have to see if I come up with that later. Okay, Miko, question, comment, addition?
I just had a comment of that I've recently been like having a lot of stuff come up because I've been living in community again and having stuff around like community and also expressing my own sexuality. And I had never put the 2 and 2 together of that community is part, like the relational aspect of the sacral chakra. And yeah, so that was cool to like put those together.
I love it when that happens. It just kind of makes sense, like with the hip pain and the menstrual pain thing. It's like, oh, it's my psoas, or oh, it's the second chakra. Of course, those came up together. And the same thing, like community and sexuality, like, yes, obviously they'd be coming up together. So that's neat to hear. Love it. Anything else? Okay, how is this format for you? A little bit of fun. We're just kind of touching into each center, familiarizing ourselves. And this is in yogic tradition. Oh, good. Thank you. I need the feedback because I can probably change it after a snack if necessary. But this is part of Jnana Yoga, not the version of the Bhagavad Gita, but in speaking generally, which is that through study, through contemplation, through introspection, we're actually opening up the energy body. This is one of these, like happened for me as I did my demo session for myself. It's like, oh, wait, friendship. And all of a sudden those little spokes on those wheels start functioning again. And so that's my hope, is to just give you some stuff to play with. Some of it is review for some of you, but to try to emphasize the work aspects. Like, who cares if you can memorize that it's the water element or what its name is, but how do you use that? Why should we care that it's called Svadhisthana, right? Well, what's the seat of the self? Well, developmentally, if you survived long enough to be in a body, then it's your relationships that are the seat of yourself. You're made out of relationships. Holy shit. So yeah, so even these little Sanskrit characters, that's how you might work with, turn them into an alchemical process rather than a collection of factoids about ancient Indian traditions. So that's my hope with the format. I'm glad it is working for you. When we come back, we'll just continue to walk up these centers, introspective. You'll get insights about some of your clients. And you're like, whoa, they're a solar plexus person. Now I understand. And then we'll finish off with some practices, and it'll be an extremely fun day together. Sunday fun day. Yeah. All right. It is now 1:31. So let us come back, 1:31 Pacific. Let's come back at 2:31 Pacific, or whatever time it is where you are, in an hour. Okay. See you soon.